Hi, my name is Guy Moxey from Wolfspeed Power and welcome to In the Studio. And today we're joined by Mr. Rex Felton, our Head of Operations for Wolfspeed, the man who's been the Mr. First, the Mr. the Largest and the Mr. Only manufacturing for Silicon Carbide in the world. So Rex, very happy to have you here and welcome.
Thank you, Guy. My pleasure to be here.
So Rex, welcome to In the Studio. Thanks for making the time to be here because you're an incredibly busy person. So I really appreciate the time. And, you know, the first, the largest, the only. Three massive words within this industry. And just give us a sense of what it's like to be part of that.
Yeah, it's been incredible, Guy, since day one, which was, almost 2.5 years ago. First starting with the idea of maybe building the factory here in North Carolina and then having an incredible opportunity to evaluate the chance to do it in New York with a lot of state aid and other support that they ended up giving us. And so once we finally ended up deciding to go, we realized it was going to take it wasn't just about building the building and building the factory. It was also about developing processes on equipment that we'd never used before, moving from 150 millimeter diameter to 200 millimeter, and then developing the automation that is really going to define a lot of how this factory is going to run. And so we really had three separate efforts, right? We had an effort out in what we call the pilot line out in Albany.
In SUNY Poly?
In SUNY Poly.
Okay, yes, yep.
Where again, we started with 8 people. We called them the Albany 8.
Okay. Okay. And they sort of paved the way. That was a deliberate thing right from the start to say we're going to have this tiny pilot line. And it was sort of copy exact type thing. That was the principle going into the new fab.
Well, we couldn't really copy exact because we had a lot of new equipment, but we felt like the equipment we inherited from the SUNY pilot line was a chance to actually upgrade some of the processes, learn some new thing about our existing processes, and really take it to the next level. And so the 8 people who originally were going to be here doing the factory here in Raleigh-Durham ended up relocating basically over the span of a weekend, their operation.
Wow,
up
that's incredible.
To New York, and became a very cohesive, small team that ended up doing really incredible things over a span of 2 years.
I mean, that's real dedication, and I'm glad it's happened because, this kicked off, you said 2.5 years ago. So almost instantly, COVID is upon us. Just to add to that extra challenge, and you said, the tagline first, largest, only. It sounds like there was a series of firsts here.
That's right.
Because this is not just building a ground up fab that's purely silicon carbide, the biggest one that's silicon carbide, but also launching out the chute on 200 millimeter wafer.
That's exactly right. So we actually had our firsts, if you will, out in SUNY Albany.
Right.
So we actually developed our first yieldable 200 millimeter silicon carbide in that line with, like I said, maybe 8 people, maybe grew to 15 people over the first 6 months. There were days when we had literally one person, on a Saturday or Sunday that were running that factory.
It's incredible.
And so the results were incredible. All the while we're building the factory about 80 miles to the west. And then in addition to that, we had support from the SUNY Poly system at Mohawk Valley Community College. We had a small pilot line in Utica. And that pilot line was developing at the same time the automation that would be used. This will be the first 200 millimeter wafer size fab of any type, silicon or silicon carbide, that is going to be more or less a lights out factory from an automation standpoint.
Oh, okay. Okay. I think that's amazing progress. And when was the exact date you broke ground for the main fab?
Yeah, so we had a lot of earth moving. So we decided to go there in August of 2019.
Okay.
We did a lot of earth moving starting in really the fall, moving into early spring. But we really didn't actually break ground on anything until March of
because the winters are pretty bad. If you were starting to shift earth in the fall and then through the winter, that's a pretty rough time up in that part of the world.
That is. A little chilly.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. So on that theme, you've been here 3 years pretty much to the day. So wind back sort of 3 years, 3.5 years, 4 years ago, did you ever imagine that 9 months later you'd be standing in a muddy field in rubber boots, just looking at a sea of mud and grass thinking, we're going to build a fab here?
Yeah, it was pretty daunting at
Yeah.
the beginning. You know, it was a lot to take in, and we were very fortunate. We had a team, that Albany 8, as I mentioned, that, you know, really just jumped in with both feet. But, you know, it was a little daunting at the beginning. And then, like you said, COVID came into play. And
Unfortunately, yes.
all of the timing and, you know, working with people being out and the really extended supply chain timing that ended up hitting us. We like to say, really from the very beginning of the project, because we knew we were on extremely tight timelines, is we had to remain audible ready.
Yes.
And so when COVID hit, we had to kind of double down on that philosophy, because I think every week we came in, what we had planned for that week that was going to happen changed, usually on Monday.
Pretty fluid. But you didn't really lose that much time. Obviously, there was an impact due to things out of everyone's control. But honestly, it didn't feel like you've lost any real time. There was some milestones and bullseyes, and they've been achieved. And you know, fairly recently, it's spooled up and is now ramping to be a full first, biggest, largest commercial silicon carbide fab in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great observation, and we certainly would have liked to have done even quicker than we were. However, the team really came together, and it was an amazing amount of teamwork, not just for the folks that were in New York. We also had incredible collaboration even through the pandemic with our team here in North Carolina, whether it be our development team, the existing fab team working on processes. And I think that's something that we certainly would not have been successful without. And so it was a very neat display of teamwork and just an incredible end result, really, to get the factory, to get the process, and to get yieldable 200 millimeter MOSFET chips very soon out of the chute.
Yeah, volume. I mean, that's the name of the game now. And this was all done whilst we have two fabs here in North Carolina, and our materials machine as well, and they all fold under the operations team, the bigger operations team, and all of those were expanding capacity in different ways as well. So this is not, people tend to think just Mohawk Valley, but there's a huge infrastructure behind all of this that's been fueling this insatiable appetite for silicon carbide all along the way.
Absolutely.
And you came out of the silicon world. You're one of the big semis, and I've been in that industry too. It's a big choice to leave an established silicon machine, global machine, to go into 3 years ago, to go into an emerging technology. And so why Wolfspeed? There are other people with different degrees of silicon carbide as well. We're obviously the largest pure play company. It was a big step.
Yeah, it was a unique journey for me. So I was at a big semiconductor company previously, and then I worked for a tier 1 automotive company. Okay. Where part of what we built were inverters. In fact, we had some chips from Wolfspeed at the time. And so I knew a little bit about Cree Wolfspeed, and just really looked at this as an opportunity to come and, like you said, be a part of history. It was very clear to me, being at that company, that the silicon carbide inverters were way outperforming what we could ever achieve.
Night and day.
Night and day.
Yeah.
And so it was just a logical step for me to come join a company like Cree Wolfspeed with my semiconductor background and just knowing the incredible opportunity we have with this technology.
And it is, and I know it doesn't feel like to the industry that adding capacity was ahead of the curve, because right now, there's a lot more demand than supply available. But back 3 years ago, and prior to that, where the investment was signed off and the planning stages 4 years, 5 years ago when Greg first joined, quite a big, bold decision to be that much ahead of the curve, to say, right, we are going to do this and we're going to do it now. And I'm glad, I think the industry is glad that we have, and is glad that you've been executing on it so well, because as Greg, your boss says, this is a multi-decade opportunity. We're seeing cars now, electrification, e-mobility, but renewable energy is coming on, and then we get into grid, mid-voltage into grid. The end systems just keep lining up for Silicon Carbide, so it's a great place to be in. It's a fantastic place to be in, and I think it's easy for me as I'm just an applications engineer to blame operations about we don't have enough capacity, but it's the science behind getting it right at the right time is and of course the capacity and the funding of it is incredible, isn't it? And the Mohawk Valley was a huge move forward, and I know you have a penchant for beach balls up there. You'll have to tell us about that story as well, because I heard you do a lot of beach balls. But what are the major barriers that sort of came up that you really didn't foresee? There must have been some extra challenges, some extra spice going on up there.
Well, there was an awful lot, as I mentioned, around COVID, around the supply chain challenges. One example was we had basically the skins for the building. The walls, more or less, that closed the building and all that were very late.
Okay,
and so
that's a problem.
That's a problem. That's a problem. You can't do.
You're not wind and weatherproof with
very
that
good
walls.
fit out in 0-degree weather, right, for a clean room. And so we ended up really wrapping the building with basically it was a big baggie, right? It's basically the plastic stuff you see people wrap boats in.
Oh, okay.
So
shrink wrapped, like major shrink.
Basically shrink wrapped it. Yeah. We did our best. I'd say 3 or 4 of those shrink wraps ended up probably 20 miles down the road in the wind in the winter in New York. But again, it was just an example of calling an audible, trying to just move forward every day. And that was kind of the motto of the team, and accepting the adversity. We always talked about, hey, things mean more when you achieve them through adversity. And
they do. They have more. And sometimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
That's right.
But what about lead time of equipment? And even as this is 200 millimeter, nice wafer there in front of us, just the availability of that cutting edge equipment. You're not walking into a box chain and buying it off the shelf.
Yeah, we had a few advantages. So we did have equipment that was available to us in SUNY Poly, and that was really one of the key enablers of us making this whole thing work. But certainly we have experienced challenges. One of the neat things, though, is that I think our suppliers, one of them that supplied our implanter that we ended up moving to and really building our process around in SUNY Poly, was incredibly eager, just because they see also the opportunity we have with Silicon Carbide. And so that has helped us, but it's still been challenging. There's nobody who builds semiconductors and takes delivery of semiconductor equipment these days that doesn't have this type of challenge.
That's true. And the challenges are still going to come. I mean,
that's right.
I think it's 600 people on site. It's an incredibly automated facility. But there's still going to be 600 odd people required as this spools up throughout this calendar year. What's it like to sort of work with the local community and recruiting? And this is in it's up in New York State, but it's a reasonably rural sort of location. It's not in a major hub. So what sort of challenges have you had there?
The community has been amazing. So we have been very engaged with the community really from day one, whether it be getting involved in events that support some of the underprivileged in the community with turkey drops and other things that we would come and wrap presents at Christmas time. And so it's been really great. And then whenever, a lot of times when the community sees us in public with our Wolfspeed gear and our jackets and our shirts, they're very excited and come up to us. And so I think it gave the team very early on an idea that we weren't just building something incredible around an emerging technology. We're also lifting up a community, right? Building up a community, which was neat.
Cree back in the past, and now Wolfspeed's done in North Carolina over the years as well. You're only as good as the community that is around you.
That's right.
So amazing job, and still, you're not quite over the final hurdle yet. But I think the end's in sight. That last 100-yard dash.
We're getting close. We have material running in the factory today. We're at different stages of qualification. We have to do a lot of internal qualification of processes, and then we move on to qualification of actual customer material. But we've made a lot of good progress. And again, I think what the work we did in SUNY Poly, we built on that, and it's really creating the success that we're now starting to see out in Mohawk Valley.
That was a good model. And I know from working on the customer side of things, there's been many automotive tier ones and OEMs and other customers as well that have seen the progress along the way and are incredibly excited about it too.
Absolutely.
Because, the whole world is looking to this fab. This has got everyone's eyes and ears on it, so it's no pressure.
Yeah, we're not bashful with the team either. And I think the team really is energized, by the fact that there's so much on the shoulders of this factory and the people that work in it, to make it happen.
Well, it's in good hands for sure. But Greg says multi-decade opportunity, so we're ahead of the curve on Mohawk Valley, 200 millimeter. But this is just going to keep coming and coming and coming beyond the length of our careers.
Yeah, no doubt.
So what's, within the realms of what you can say, what's next for Wolfspeed? Because this demand is just going to be there and continue.
Well, like I said, we're the first and we're the largest, and being on 200 millimeter first is a huge advantage. It's almost 2x the usable, yieldable surface area that you would get on a 6-inch wafer. But the fact that we are first, is not without risks. And so certainly we are working on our capability of producing wafers here in Durham. We're expanding things here. We are getting very close to announcing our first, what we call mega materials factory.
Yes, because obviously our vertical integration perspective, yes.
Exactly, which is a huge advantage to us in so many ways, but it also makes us the the only game in town, right? We can't go buy what we need from somewhere else, and so it's a huge opportunity. And then beyond that, we're also going to be building out the second phase of the fab
in Mohawk Valley.
In Mohawk Valley, it's within the same clean room, but the way we built the clean room is we did the first 65% of it that was fitted out, so we could get it done quickly and start to move equipment in a timely fashion. We have 35% more to fit out.
Okay, flex expansion space. Okay.
Exactly. And then beyond that, we could actually duplicate the size of this wafer fab on the existing acreage we have.
Okay.
It would be going from east to west.
Because we're only really just seeing the start of major applications like EV really ramping up. So it's good to know that we're in check with that, because the leader of pure play compound semiconductor company, we've got to be on it.
Yeah. And our growth potential and the CAGR we're looking at going out in time is incredible. And so, even with the capacity we see this factory supplying, which is going to be incredibly substantial, on the order of 30x from where we started in this journey, to probably 20x from where we are today.
Yes.
It's huge, but it also is just about sold out.
Yeah, and that's a short period of time, that increase as well. It's not over 2 decades; it's over a series of years.
Exactly.
So it's. But before we finish, Rex, tell me about the beach ball fondness up in Mohawk Valley. I've seen pictures and heard about thousands of beach balls. Where on earth does that fit into a highly automated semiconductor fab?
Yeah, thanks for asking about the beach balls. The beach balls are, make for a neat picture, but they actually serve a really important purpose. So one of the things we have in the factory is something called a waffle table.
Okay.
Which is over 600 conjoined pieces of 3.5 to 4 foot thick concrete, which the equipment sits on. The facility's infrastructure goes through to connect the equipment to the facility. But it has holes in it, just like it sounds. And so when you put the waffle table in, the next thing you have to do is coat it. And so you don't have coating dripping everywhere all over the place.
Oh, I get it.
You have to put something in those holes, and it just so happens that your standard size beach ball fits really well. And so, there might have been a shortage of beach balls in upstate New York.
And that's the reason.
And in 2020 and 2021, that's probably why.
And pretty good for a beach ball league later on. Rex, thanks for joining us. You're the world's busiest man right now, and you've still got that last 100 yards to go on Mohawk Valley. But fantastic job, not only for Wolfspeed, but the whole Silicon Carbide industry. So really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Guy. It's been great to be here.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, and thanks for joining us. Wolfspeed Power in the studio.